I've been thinking a lot about how Apple Silicon is powering pretty much everything in the ecosystem once we get the crappy Intel processors out of there, and there's something that other companies have thought of that I would love to see Apple do, but I just know it's such a good idea, Apple would never do it. Let's begin. So if you guys been following me on Twitter, you know I've been on a non-stop rampage talking about how great I think it would be if this M1 equipped iPad Pro had the option to dual boot into macOS, so that essentially all of the great software features that macOS offers could now be taken advantage of a device with much better hardware than any Mac out there, between Face ID, center stage, cellular options, 120Hz mini LED, rear-facing cameras, gyroscopes, all the amazing things this has. It would be great if it could do everything my Mac could, but the common running theory as to why Apple doesn't allow such a thing is because, well, if the iPad could do everything a Mac could do, then wouldn't Macs become kind of pointless? I disagree, mainly because in order to get iPads close to the price and feature set of MacBooks, you have to spend way more money, and I think Apple is perfectly content cannibalizing other products in their ecosystem if they get people to spend more money. It's not like Apple was against releasing the iPhone because they knew the iPhone would cannibalize their iPod sales. They knew that they could get people to spend way more money on iPhones, so they were okay that that was cannibalizing their iPods. And I think in a similar way, people would spend a lot more money on iPad Pros than they would on MacBooks, particularly people that are just looking for something like the M1 chip or 13-inch display or whatever. People who wanted something faster than the M1 or a bigger display than the iPad, they would still be buying Macs. But on the subject of the iPhone, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people who are just average everyday consumers looking to buy a computer, and they don't really need anything too power intensive, they likely are not going to truly take advantage of the M1 chip. I know a lot of people out there that are probably just college students that are buying the M1 MacBook Air or even the MacBook Pro just for basically using the web, browsing social media, and, you know, doing text editing or working on PowerPoint and doing fairly basic things that all of the insane power the M1 offers is probably kind of overkill, and that's fine because they can still make it in cheap hardware. But what I think is fair to say is even Apple Silicon in iPhones, like the A14 chip, is probably plenty fast for the average consumer. And now that we know macOS is capable of booting off of Apple Silicon and running off of that, how crazy would it be for iPhones to dock with external monitors and actually start outputting macOS when you dock them to a Samsung DeX ripoff, essentially, is what I'm pitching. Because, yeah, we've known about it for a long time. Samsung has had this option where, yeah, you can connect via Bluetooth a keyboard and mouse to your Android phone. You dock it on this specialized machine that is able to power an external monitor, and the phone itself is actually running the operating system. And I think there's a ton of iPhones out there, and Apple's very good at making desktop-style display panels. It's just that with the M1 iMac and its glorious, beautiful, giant chin, that's where the computer is stored, and that's where a lot of your money goes towards, is those ports and having the M1 chip on the inside. Now, think about it for a moment. If you could actually just use the chip that's in your iPhone, because moving forward, I'm sure A15 chip is going to be even faster than the A14, but you got to agree that if miraculously Apple decided, you know what, we're going to make even cheaper desktop iMacs, and we're just going to put the A14 or A15 chip in there, that would probably cover the basics of macOS for a lot of people. Yeah, I get that it wouldn't be as fast as the M1, but it would probably consume a lot less power, and for the basic tasks of, you know, FaceTime, Zoom meetings, and text editing, if someone's just looking for a basic Mac that doesn't have a lot of power, making some kind of Apple version of DeX would probably be pretty applicable to a lot of people. I know lots of people with iPhones, and I know a lot of people that were very interested in the 24-inch iMac just because they don't want a laptop and they want a bigger screen and they want something that's stationary and sits at their desk. And the idea of just being able to dock your iPhone on either a little lightning connector or, who knows, maybe this would be a great time for Apple to switch to USB-C. Just kidding. I know that'll never happen, but some kind of dock that would allow the iPhone to power a larger size, very high resolution display. And within this external monitor Apple could make, it could have speakers, it could have a solid camera, or if you want, you can just use the camera that your iPhone already comes with, because that one's probably going to be better than most of the desktop iMacs Apple is shipping these days. And now suddenly Apple doesn't have to ship an entire computer in a monitor for a average consumer type desktop, and I just think it's a great use of resources considering saying we probably have an overkill amount of power in all of our phones that is really heavily optimized for these advanced computational photography features, but at the end of the day, most of us are just kind of texting, having FaceTime calls and checking email, and having all that kind of great A14 performance in there is good for longevity, but I also at the same time think it could totally power a Mac if we wanted to, especially for the basic tasks. A14 chip, and I'm sure the A15 chip would probably outperform a lot of the Intel processors that Apple was shipping in their Macs not too long ago, and allowing the iPhone to kind of boot itself into a macOS mode with an external monitor attached, of course. Wouldn't want you to be able to do that just off the iPhone display itself. That would be ridiculous, but you would be able to theoretically unlock your Mac via Face ID. I'm sure Apple, with their ecosystem advantages, would make it a very clean, very seamless experience, and unlike Samsung DeX or Chrome OS or all of those other knockoff operating systems, macOS actually has a bunch of really cool productivity-based features in it that people could take advantage of. You could literally start writing Xcode applications off of your iPhone, and I know that macOS Big Sur takes up a lot of space, but 45 gigs, and probably this year we're going to have 128 gig by default across all iPhones. It's not something that all iPhone users would utilize. In fact, you could even restrict it to just the Pro iPhones if you want to, because they have more RAM, so they would be able to handle macOS applications better. And I'm not suggesting that Apple has to merge iPadOS and macOS or merge iOS and macOS, but just allowing our hardware to actually truly take advantage of what it's capable of and allowing it to do things that it couldn't do by itself, whether it be writing music within Logic or even editing some light video in Final Cut Pro. Imagine if all of the great Pro apps that Apple sells for the Mac could now be accessible to more and more iPhone users if they were willing to spend maybe $600 or $700 on just an Apple branded external monitor that comes with a little iPhone dock. And I could see that fitting perfectly into a lot of different people's work lives, where they just come home from work at the end of the day. Now they want a bigger screen to interact with, so they drop their iPhone down. Now they have fully fledged Mac OS, which can do Final Cut, which can do Logic, it can do Xcode, and it would be a whole lot cheaper than having to spend all your money on a new Mac Mini and an external monitor, or a whole new 24-inch iMac. But as many people have probably already commented, it would be so good, it would be so easy, it would probably start cannibalizing Mac sales, and that's why they wouldn't do it. Apple would much rather you just buy a whole iMac and separately buy a whole iPhone, but I don't know. As much as I am an Apple sheep and I love the capability of all my Apple hardware, it just kind of makes me annoyed and frustrated whenever the end result of, oh, that sounds like a really good idea and they should probably do that, but they couldn't sell as much hardware that way, so that's why they wouldn't do it. That's a dumb reason to not do something, and I think that Apple is constantly looking for ways at cannibalizing their best-selling product, so that's why they shouldn't be afraid to do it, but they probably won't. I'm curious if you guys would be interested in a sub $1,000, high-resolution monitor that you could dock your iPhone with and it would suddenly turn into a Mac. Does that sound interesting to you, or am I an idiot? Feel free to let me know. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.